Perth might be a good place to go to because your kids can also access free education in public school in Perth, not in the other cities. Okay.
Hello, beautiful people. It's your girl Ada again, and welcome to today's episode of UK versus Australia, according to the topic. So today I've decided to bring somebody who's actually resident in Australia to tell us from her own self, like from the horse's mouth. So it's not just me exaggerating today. It's going to be somebody telling us from her own experiences based on how long she's been in this place. So I have here with me somebody, Chioma. I'm going to allow her to introduce herself. Chioma, please say hello to us.
Hey everyone. So my name is Chioma. My YouTube channel is Life with Chioma, which is displayed on the screen already. And as Ada said, yes, I live in Australia. I've been here now for about 8 years. I'm a social worker. A lot of what I share on my YouTube channel is in relation to my relocation experience from Nigeria to Australia, and life in Australia as well. So I am a mom of 2. So I also share, tips relating to what I believe families will also find useful who want to relocate, because the experience might be a little different for families, from single people. But yeah, that's it about me. Thank you so much for having me.
So today we're just going to be going through some certain things that major things people will want to be aware of when considering relocating either to Australia. I'm saying that specific to somebody who has actually lived in UK, if you get what I mean. So it's at this point you're comparing. Let me see. So this is like a battle. It's like Australia versus UK. Let's see who is going to win.
I know which.
Let's talk about the general cost of living. I know there is a cost of living crisis all over right now, not just in UK, but let's talk about general cost of living in Australia. What is it like 2 years back? What is it like now? Has there been a massive hike in price of food, in housing, and things
Yes, things have gone up. If we're talking about cost of living, let me start with very basic things, the things that I know everyone would experience. So things like rent, food, transportation, all of that. In the area where I live, I remember when we first moved into this area back in 2018, the rent here was about $560 per week, because rent here is calculated per week.
Okay.
So 560 Australian dollars per week. As I speak to you now, rents have gone all the way up to between $800 to $900 a week. So that's almost $1,000 that you're paying.
That's almost 30% increment, if not more.
Yeah. Where I live, that's in the area where I live, which is far from the city center. It's not like I am smack in the middle of Sydney city center, or the CBD as they call it. Buying in my area is around 1.5 for a 4-bedroom, very standard, nothing fancy at all. Just 1.5. And then of course, if you're adding other rishi on top, that's your money continues to go higher. So as I was saying, the further you travel towards the city center, obviously the higher you pay. There are places where house prices are up to 2.2 million, 2.2, 2.5. Yeah, wow. It is that expensive. And these are for standard houses, 3-bedrooms, 4-bedroom houses. So depending on the area where you're buying. In terms of other things like food, I feel like food is, food, however bad it is, you will still be able to eat. Things that used to cost $5 would be about $6.50, right?
With the high cost of living in the UK, as we've experienced it, the housing has also gone high. So that's why I said the problem is not just here, because somebody commented something on one of the videos. She was like, beware, Australia is very, very expensive as well. When you're thinking of moving to Australia, Australia is very, very expensive. But UK now, things have also gone up. Like I said, though I live in Northern Ireland, and Northern Ireland is one of the cheapest states in the United Kingdom. So the cost might not be the same with somebody who's living in England, right? So the house in here for a standard 3-bedroom renting before would be around 600, because that's what I was paying. But now it's gone up, as it's now 1,002 for the same area. I'm judging with the same area. So that's 100% hike.
Wow. Yeah.
the price for the house is a
Mm.
100% hike, as well as the buying. It's also gone like it's mad. So
Yeah.
these things are happening. My major question is, I don't have a problem with a high cost of living, but was equivalent increase in the pay? Like, the people begin to get more salary in Australia to compensate for this high cost of living?
Mm. Well, in Australia, we have all these industry award rates. Yeah. So depending on the industry that you work in, you will likely be, your pay will be determined by the particular industry award you're on. Okay. And what
Okay.
I understand about industry awards is that it increases every year by a certain percentage. It's different for every industry. So
Okay.
you keep increasing. And what a lot of people would advise you to do as an employee is to join the union within your industry, because that is a good way to negotiate
Your
um,
pay.
pay, not just pay rises, but pay rises that account for inflation and rising cost of living and things like that. So,
Okay. Okay.
yeah, like for instance, in my job, even before all of this started, okay, in my job, the award, the industry award that I am on, allows me an increase twice a year. Okay, twice a
Okay.
year. So
Beautiful.
first on the anniversary of my employment, and also at the start of the new financial year, I get a pay rise.
That I'm fuming.
Yeah, I get a pay rise. And then recently, the union in the industry that I work in, they were able to negotiate an even higher increase in salaries. Here in Australia, they do try to increase salaries every once in a while, to account for inflation and the rising cost of living.
The next thing I would like us to talk about is schools for kids. I've got
Mm-hmm.
kids, and so wherever I'm going, like, that's one of my major priorities. Do they have to pay for fees? Because here in the UK, I know they still have private schools in the UK, but very few. If you ask me,
Mm,
maybe just like 3% of the UK
mm,
population will attend the private school. Most persons will attend like the grammar schools and the secondary schools and all,
mm.
and those schools are actually free. Okay,
Yeah.
so education here in the UK, I can say it's free to an
Mm.
extent when you get to the college and the university. So what's it like in Australia?
I feel like that is where the UK might have 1 point above Australia.
Australia is a
Yeah.
bad boost.
So it depends on what, your residency status. So if you're coming in as a permanent resident, all fine and good, your kids can attend school for free, any public school for free. But if you are on certain temporary visas, not all temporary visas, there are some temporary visas where you can also access fee waivers for your kids and they don't have to pay school fees. But if you're on like a student visa, unfortunately, you will pay international fees for your kids in public school. And
So
still on that,
what's the fees like? What's the
yeah,
fees
fees
like per term?
well, it's different for every state. I can only speak for the states that I am in because these things
Where
change
you
all
are,
the time.
okay.
By the time my first daughter was ready to go to school, we were paying about $6,000 for her per year in
Per
public
year.
school per
Okay,
year.
per year.
That
So that's like
amount,
with 3 terms.
yes, 4 terms actually, because they have 4 terms here.
Okay.
But the last time I checked, which would have been early this year, the fee has gone up to 8,000 per child per year. Yes. So if you're on a temporary visa that does not grant those fee waivers, that's the amount you can expect to pay in New South Wales, where I live. I don't know about other states.
Okay.
Um, yeah, but
But if
yeah,
you're
that's
if you're
how
coming
it
in
is.
if you're coming in as a permanent resident, then
If you're coming as
you
a
can
permanent
access
resident,
free
then your
schools.
kids can go to school for free, except if you want to enroll them in a private school. Of course, for private school, everybody pays.
How about healthcare? Because here in the UK we have the NHS, right?
Mm,
Now, just like you said, depending on the routes which you came in through to the UK, before when I first came in, even as a health worker, we were paying for our IHS fee. There's something
mm.
called immigration health surcharge. That's like a fee towards your NHS, like a health insurance, I would say.
Oh,
So at the
okay.
time, and it's some good amount of money. You're going to pay based on how many years visa. you were being allocated. So if you're getting a 3 years visa, you have to pay your IHS for 3 years. That's to cover the period of time you're there. But whenever the COVID hit, and then the health workers were sort of compensated, and then the IHS was taken out. So if you're coming to the UK as a nurse, as a carer, you don't have to pay that IHS fee anymore. But if you're coming as a student, irrespective of the category of school you're coming to attend, you have to pay that immigration health surcharge towards your health. So aside from that, that's why you hear people say health in the UK is free. It's not 100% free. It's for immigrants. So it all depends on the visa you're coming with. So what's it like for somebody also coming to Australia, either maybe on a permanent residency or on a skilled workers visa?
Yeah. So most skilled work visas, okay, and the thing is that here in Australia, skilled work visas, a lot of them are permanent residency visas, okay.
Yeah.
So in Australia we have Medicare. So Medicare would be the equivalent of NHS in the UK.
NHS, okay.
It covers everybody who is a permanent resident, who is a citizen, and certain classes of temporary visa holders as well. So if your visa is a temporary visa but it's a work visa, you might still access Medicare. If you're a student visa holder, there's a different there's another insurance scheme that you must be on, and you pay for that one yourself. Yeah, you pay for that one yourself. Medicare is free if you're, within any of the classes of people that Medicare covers. It is free, but for international students in particular, with certain visitors, we have something called overseas health cover. That is for international students, and that one you pay it. Okay, so it will be the equivalent of the IHS. And of course, depending on whether you're coming in as a single person or coming in as a family, they have single cover, they have family cover. So you take what is appropriate for your circumstance. But okay.
Thank you so much for throwing more light. Like, I'm learning so much. Now I'm asking myself, like, let me keep my decisions to myself so far. But for anybody who is watching this video and maybe you're also planning to relocate to Australia, you're in the UK, you're trying to make that decision, this is an eye-opener. It's better before you go. So you don't go and then you begin to say, oh, had I known. Okay, so have your options laid out on the table, especially if you're already somebody who is already in the UK. So ask yourself, those things I saw about Australia, are they really worth it for me to go? That's why Chioma is here. She's painting everything out in white and black. She's not sugarcoating anything. So this is the truth. You take it and you decide. Make your decision. If you're watching this video to this time and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Hit the like button to motivate me to do more videos. I will also be leaving Chioma's link down here. You can go check her channels out if you want to know more about Australia. Like, she has content concerning Australia's in and out. Find out if Australia is actually this land of milk and honey, as we've been hearing, or not. So it helps you make your informed decision. So the next thing I would like to ask you is about job opportunities for people not in the health sector, because most of the persons now watching my video about this particular topic might be nurses already in the UK, or even people elsewhere who are maybe in the health sector. And something very common about nurses or health workers who come down to the UK is that the job opportunity for spouses are not there. So far, you're not on the job shortage occupation list. Your degree is not accepted. You go to look for a job, you don't get what you actually studied in school. And that's like a serious hindrance for most spouses, who accompany their wife or their husband down to the UK. And it's terrible, really. It's not nice. So what is it like in Australia? Are the degrees from Africa, from Nigeria, Ghana, Zimbabwe, are these degrees accepted? Would you actually get a reasonable job, a paid employment in something you studied in Australia?
The answer is both yes and no. Okay. So yes, in the sense that, first of all, I have observed that in most Western countries, especially the countries that we as Nigerians, as Africans would love to migrate to, they have a very similar system. So things will not be too different between the UK and Australia, okay, in that regard. But what I have seen also is that, different jobs have different professional requirements that you must meet. So prepare yourself to meet those requirements. For instance, my husband is in construction, and here, okay, he was into that line of work even before we left Nigeria. But here, if you do not have a license. You can't
Can
practice.
practice, yeah.
Because even in the construction industry, you can't practice.
Thank you very much. So the next one, which is like the very big one, which is one of the major reasons people actually are attracted to Australia, especially people from Africa, is what? The weather. You can see I'm already on a jumper. I'm already on a jumper. Now they say we are what? We're in autumn, right? But it's freezing. Like 100%, it's freezing. And this is us now from now till maybe sometime in June. That's and then we'll go into summer for maybe 2 months or 1 month, depending on the year, and then we're back again. So that's just what life is like here in the UK. And most people who are from warmer climate like us, it's very difficult to adjust. The weather, like I also read and I've also asked, and I've seen that there are places also in Australia that do experience extreme of temperature, right? That are also very cold. So please tell us places like this so we know where to avoid before we end up going from kettle to pots.
Okay, so yes, there are some places that are cold. But if I'm speaking in a general sense, Australia is a warm country. Like it
Okay.
is warm weather-wise. Most of the places where immigrants would end up are places like Sydney, Brisbane, Perth, and Melbourne. Okay, these four cities are the main cities. There are people in Tasmania as well, and Tasmania is the coldest state. Okay, that's the coldest part of Australia as far as I'm concerned. So maybe Tasmania weather, I've never been there myself. It might be more comparable to the UK weather. Sydney is in the middle. It's not too hot, it's not
It's
too
not too
cold.
cold. Okay.
It only gets cold early in the mornings or late in the night. Around midday, you still get temperatures that I am sure would be the kind of temperatures you experience in summer.
Now, summer.
In your summer. That's what
That
we
is what
experience
thought.
in winter. That's what we experience in winter. Like there's like 2 or 3 hours, 4 hours in the middle of the day when you can actually take off your jacket and it's winter. But as the day wears on and you get into
Okay.
it gets cold and then it gets really freezing cold sometimes. Every once in a long while we might drop down to like 1 degree, but that's like in the morning or late in the night. Yeah, so that's how winter is in Sydney. In Brisbane, Brisbane is hotter than Sydney, so the winters are even milder there. But Melbourne is a little colder. Okay, Perth I think is kind of comparable to Sydney, and then Tasmania is the
The
coldest of
coldness
them. Yeah, so generally the weather here is fantastic.
is
This is
fantastic.
spring, which feels like summer. It's been so hot. Yeah, we've not even entered the real summer, and it's been so hot already.
The weather is one of the things that is actually very attractive when you talk about Australia because the weather in the UK, I don't know. I don't know. They say at some point you might get used to it, but I don't
Right.
see it happening. I don't see
Uh,
it happening. So, Choma, before we go, can you just throw more light about cities that are not so expensive and
mm,
reasons why, not just about not being expensive, maybe places that will be immigrant friendly for people
mm,
coming from this side, where they want to, people want a place where they can also find community, right? Where there
yeah,
are other people, like other
mm,
people from Africa, from similar
mm,
places. Because somebody was on my comment and was asking me specifically about pets.
mm.
She was looking to relocate down there, but she doesn't know so much about it. So if there's like what is it like, what's the cost of living there compared to the other states, and what
Mm.
is it like immigration status compared to
Yeah,
others as well.
yeah. Okay. So, um, Sydney is the most expensive. So let's is the most expensive when we're talking about cost of living and cost of living specifically around housing.
Yeah.
Okay. Specifically around housing. But Sydney also, in my opinion, has one of the biggest Nigerian communities here, I would
Yeah,
say.
definitely.
Um, but another place that is quite popular, especially with Nigerians, is Brisbane.
Okay.
Okay. And even Melbourne, I feel like all these places have a really strong presence of Africans generally, but also Nigerians, and Perth also. Okay.
Okay.
Perth is, I have found that Perth is also very attractive to Nigerians. But I know that there's a strong African presence in Brisbane, in Melbourne, in Perth. Okay, so if you're coming to Sydney, you're going to Melbourne, you're going to Brisbane or to Perth, I am sure you will find a community of Nigerians or Africans there. Next to Sydney is Melbourne. So Melbourne is the next expensive place to live in. And then following that is Brisbane and then Perth.
So Perth is like one of the cheapest then?
Yeah, so Perth is one of the cheapest. It's for anyone who is coming to study and you're studying towards a master's at the very least, not bachelor degree, towards a master's. Perth might be a good place to go to because your kids can also access free education in public school in Perth, not in the other cities. Okay. In Sydney, where I live, in Brisbane, and also in Melbourne, if you're not studying a PhD or a master's in research, I don't think your kids can study for free. But in Perth, if you're studying a master's by coursework, master's by research, PhD, your kids can study for free. So yeah, I hope I touched on everything.
Yeah, I think you already touched on everything. So what's housing like in Perth for both buying and renting? Any idea?
Well, Perth,
Like in comparison to Sydney.
oh, it's much cheaper. This is not the figure I'm going to throw out here is not very informed because I don't check these things every day. But I think comparing it to, if I am comparing apples to apples this time around, if I am comparing a house in Perth that is 1 hour or 1.5 hours away from the city center, just as
Like
the place in Sydney, you will not be paying up to $1 million. Okay, maybe 800,000 can get you a good place. But here in Sydney, for the same standard of house, the same distance from the city center, 1.5. So that's the comparison. Yeah. So 800,000 versus 1.5.
that's a whole lot. I'm
Yeah,
going to Perth.
yeah. Sydney is expensive. It is expensive.
I'm going to Perth.
Yeah.
As you can see, I'm living in Northern Ireland. I left England for a reason. This is why I do this research, because I don't want to go to a place where then it becomes the same 10 and 10 pence, like you say you're coming for a better pay, and then you end up spending all the money in the cost of living. So it's best to have your research, know these things before you move. And it also depends on what matters so much to you. There are people who might just want to live in Sydney because, just like you say, they have like a large Nigerian community, right? But if you really don't mind, then you can live in a place that's cheaper,
If you work in healthcare, I think wherever you go in Australia, any of the cities that you go to would be fine. But one thing that attracts people to places like Sydney and Melbourne in particular is because they are bigger in population, also bigger in their, economic capacity. And so there's more opportunities here.
So there's more opportunities like you have in England as well, in London specifically.
So that's another reason why people are attracted to, Sydney, Melbourne, and maybe even Brisbane. But if you then weigh it up with cost of living, buying a house, and all of that, it's up to you to decide what your priority is.
Okay. So, all right. Before I go, let's talk about something I learned. Somebody was telling me about salary packaging. One of our biggest problems here in the UK is our tax, right? Half of it is sliced with a very sharp knife. At the end of your work, it's sliced. And then you get, whenever you get what is left of it. So somebody mentioned the salary packaging as you have in Australia. So I will let you explain better.
Well, salary packaging, I hope I have the right language to explain it. But one thing to keep in mind is that not every workplace
does that.
Not every workplace does it. Where I work now, we don't do the salary packaging the same way it was in my previous place of work. In my previous place of work, so what happens is that you have your income, right? And then you have the tax that comes out of that income. Okay. Now, when you salary sacrifice, which is also the salary packaging, it means that you're increasing your take-home pay. Okay, you increase your take-home pay. However, that increment might be applied towards certain things. So depending on the workplace, some workplaces will give it to you in a card where you can spend the money, or you have to salary sacrifice your rent or a car loan or something. So it has something at the end of a financial year, right? You lodge your tax returns, and sometimes you get some money back if you have paid more than you should have
Oh,
paid in tax,
yeah.
right? So that money, that amount that you get back is what actually comes back to you earlier through your salary. So instead of waiting
Oh,
until it comes back to you in your salary, so that is the salary packaging. So at tax time, you would find that your returns would be a lot smaller if you salary sacrificed or salary packaged. If you did not do the salary packaging, then you get a bigger amount at the end
tax
of the
return.
tax year. That's a very simple way to explain it. That's a very
Well, here
simple way.
we don't even have like the tax return as you have in the US and in the
Oh, you
Australia.
don't have
Here
that?
you would have no, we don't. The HMRC would refund some money to you if you overpay, but in most
Mm,
instances, well, I've been in this country nearly 5 years. I've only had a whether a tax return once in that 5 years, and that was around
mm.
£200, and that was it. That was it. Why my friends in the US or elsewhere, they'll be like every year they get something, at times get as much as $10,000,
Yes.
$5,000, such amounts of money. We don't have
Mm,
both the packaging and the
yeah.
sacrifice. No one. No one. So
And another thing is that the government here, the government provided some, like a tax offset, which applies automatically to your tax returns at the end of the year. However, the bad news is that this year that offset was removed. So a lot of us are actually ending up with a tax debt instead
ooh,
of
a
instead
tax
of getting
return.
money back. Instead of getting money back, we now owe the government.
I hope Australia is not wanting to buy knowledge from UK. Give us a little bit of advice for people who are hoping to come over just before we end.
The one advice that I give everybody is put your head down and do your research properly. Don't just go blindly. Okay,
Okay.
this is a place where you can thoroughly enjoy your life, enjoy your experience here if you do it right. And it's
Okay.
also a place where you can regret you can regret your life if you do not do it well.
Don't do it right.
So,
Okay.
and doing it well, the difference between doing it well and not doing it well is just your research. That is
Your
all.
research before you come. Thank you very much.
Just your
That's
research.
that's that's like the summary of everything, and that's the whole point of this video. So, guys, if you've been watching this video tonight, I'm sure you've learned one or two things. If you still have questions about our life in Australia, some things maybe we've missed out, we didn't talk about, leave them on the comment section. Okay, I'm tagging Chema on this video, so she'll be able to see some of them, and will also share her knowledge with us. What they say, a huge thank you there for like giving us an eye opener. So for anybody who is looking to come over, like you need to know your A from your B and make sure you're making the right decision as concerns your own family and your personal interest at this time in your life. Okay. Thank you so much. I hope you've liked, shared, and subscribed to this channel. And until next time, we'll see you again. Bye bye.